What new technology can you remember being introduced when you were little? For me, it's things like electronic calculators and colour TV. For you, it could be microwaves, it could be the internet, it could be smartphones. Well, today what we're going to talk about is the advent of the latest time-saving device and how you can use it for your social media content. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. Welcome to the Good Enough Counsellors podcast and my social media monthly episode where we're going to talk about ways that you can use social media in June, but also we'll talk about AI and how you can use it to help you with your social media feed. When I was thinking about this episode, I thought it might particularly help those of you who struggle to think about what to post on social media, or perhaps you might find it difficult to write in a particular way, or a particular structure, or it might even be that you're dyslexic and the whole thought of writing anything is something that fills you with dread. Well, AI can help you in all of these situations. And although I'm somebody who's not short of a good idea or two and have been known to be able to come out with quite a few ideas and how to write them for my social media posts, I found AI to be a real game changer. And so I'd love to share with you today the different ways that you can use it. And what I thought I'd do is make it very grounded and real by just sharing mainly what I do using artificial intelligence, because I'm not really a techie person. And I'll tell you in a little while about something that someone in my therapy growth group told me about this week, which just goes to prove, I don't know everything, but I do know enough to be able to pass on some useful tips and tricks that you might find helpful if you've got a social media page. I also think it might be useful if you could hear some of the queries that I use on AI so that you can get an idea of the way that you can ask questions and actually how simple it is. So here's just a few things that I use AI for. And if you're wondering, how do you find AI? I don't know all the different ones, but I tend to use ChatGPT. I now actually pay for a monthly subscription for it because I use it so much and I'm doing quite a lot of copying and pasting of things like my podcasts. So I actually pay a small monthly subscription. And if you want to find out about ChatGPT, you just go to the website address openai, that's all one word, .com. And that'll take you to ChatGPT. Another one is Google Gemini. So you can go into Google and just ask it to show you its Gemini AI, and that will help you. There's also Copilot. If you've got a Microsoft Office sub, you can also use that. Another one that people recommend is one called Claude, because that's supposed to be quite good for writing. So lots of different ways you can find AI. And as I say, I mainly use ChatGPT because that's the one I pay for. And I will, in a while, point out some of the obvious ChatGPT signs that I've picked up along the way, so you can try and avoid them. And I'll explain why in a little while. So what we're going to do in this episode is I'm going to give you some ideas about how I use AI. And then I'm going to give you a couple of qualifications, a couple of sort of conditions that you need to think about if you are using AI in order to help yourself and not make it that it's too formulaic. Then after I've done that, we'll move on and we'll talk about some posts for June 2025. So let's start with some of the ways that I actually use AI. AI is absolutely brilliant at giving you ideas. And in fact, some people describe it as a giant guessing machine, but quite a clever guessing machine. But ultimately, it's really important to remember that AI does guess. And this is why it's really important to double check any facts that the AI is giving you. And my daughter actually does a bit of work for AI companies doing fact checking for them. And she says that actually about 90% of the time, the facts are wrong. And I discovered this myself recently when I asked it to check for the awareness dates. I think it was maybe February or March. And the list it gave me was just completely wrong. Half of them were made up. They didn't exist. So don't use it for fact checking. Use it for ideas. That's a good way of using it, but don't rely on it for facts. So I will actually ask it for topics. I'll say to it, I'm thinking about doing a podcast about this. Can you give me some ideas? And what it'll do is it will help me if I'm feeling a bit lacking in inspiration. It will give me some ideas. If I want to write, say, about a particular topic, but I don't really know what angle I want to take, it will help me think of different angles. It will also help me drill down into a topic. So once I've actually decided that I want to work on one particular topic, I will then go down further and ask it for more ideas. And so if you've got something that you want to talk about, so say you want to talk about anxiety, you might ask it, what are the different topics I could talk about around anxiety? And it might, for example, give you different types of anxiety that people feel. You could ask it, what are the typical emotions associated with this particular type of anxiety? What are good tips for people with this type of anxiety? And it will give you a lot of information. And that can be really helpful in just thinking about what angle would I like to take? How would I like to approach this particular subject? And you can also use it if you're thinking about blog posts. So if you've done a dozen blog posts and now you're running out of ideas, you could say to it, here's the list of blog posts I've done already. Can you give me some other ideas? And it's absolutely brilliant at helping you with things like that. Then what I'll do is, once I've actually got it to give me an idea, I will have a conversation with it about writing the post. And I do this in a couple of different ways. So often I'll start where I've actually written a post myself, or the other way is that I will get it to write the post for me. If I'm writing it myself, what it tends to help me with is things like I will ask it to help me make it more interesting, or I will ask it to help me think of an engaging way to get people to actually read the post. So at the start of the post, what I'll be trying to do is draw people in. So I will use AI to help me think of a way to elicit curiosity in people so that they'll want to read further. Once I've got beyond that bit, it might tighten up some of my language for me. And especially if you're somebody who struggles to write perhaps in a structured way, or you tend to be a little bit verbose, or you use maybe jargon and you want to use plainer language, or you want to make your sentences a little less convoluted, it will help you clarify your writing. So I find that a really useful way of using it as well. So I'll write the post, but then I'll pop it into the AI and just ask it to help me improve the post. And then when I'm really stuck, it will actually write the post for me. And then what I'll do is I will actually do it the other way around, where it's giving me the ideas, but I convert it from AI language into my own language, but I might use the structure that it's suggesting. And over time as well, what it's got to know is it's got to know my style. And so it will help me, I'll say to it, here's an example of a query that I might give it. So I might ask it to help me write a more encouraging post or a more conversational type post, so to make the tone slightly different. And one of the prompts that I particularly ask it with is, quite often on my posts, what I'm doing is I'm telling people around the fact that I've got a blog that's just been published or a podcast that's been published, or I'm telling them about Therapy Growth Group. And I don't want it to come across as this sort of really salesy type of post, because I don't think that really appeals to anybody. I like to give people a story. I like to give them information. And I'll quite often be asking it to help me make it if it's written it for me, it's quite often quite direct, and I'll be asking it to help me make it gentler and softer and more like my real voice. One of the funny things that I realised I did recently, and this is just an aside, but it's quite funny, you can actually tell it how you want it to be with you. And I thought what I was telling it was how I wanted my post to be. So I told it that I wanted to be encouraging. But the way it actually worked was that actually meant that ChatGPT tried to encourage me. And it actually became quite sycophantic. And everything I did, it was saying to me, yes, that's wonderful, that's really good. And after a while, I got a bit fed up with it, and I worked out that's actually what was happening. So, you can tell it to be sycophantic if you want, and it will tell you what you want to hear. So that's just a couple of ideas about how I use it. Other things that I do is I will ask it for ideas for awareness days, different angles for awareness days. That's quite a helpful thing that I use it for. The other thing I find it really helpful for is it will, if I take a post that I've written for Facebook, because Facebook is really better suited to more conversational, long-form posts than, say, Instagram, which it tends to be a bit shorter and snappier. So I will get it to convert what I've written for Facebook into Instagram posts. But I do much prefer using Facebook to Instagram. So what I do is I will get it to shorten some of my longer Facebook posts and make it more short and direct for Instagram posts. So you can repurpose. And one thing that you might find useful is if you have a blog post, you could get it to repurpose your blog posts into shorter social media posts. So if you're producing any content, like if you do a video once a week, or you do a podcast, or you do a blog, you can use AI to break that up into shorter pieces of content. And from that point of view, it can be a really good time-saving device. Now, the thing that I was going to tell you about is images. And at the time of recording, I'm recording in April, ChatGPT has just brought out its image generator. And at the moment, I don't know if you've seen any of them, a lot of people are doing images from ChatGPT that look like a toy. They've been refashioned as a toy in a little blister pack, and the blister pack contains tools that they might be using. And this is a ChatGPT image, and it's become a bit of a trend across social media at the moment. So much so that actually I've decided not to do mine because I've seen so many of them now. I think they've lost that interest and surprise factor for me, so I'm not going to bother. But what it is doing actually is illustrating the power of ChatGPT's image generator. But I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about what Star from Another Way Counselling has done using her AI and using the image generator for ChatGPT. Is she particularly, because she's of Asian heritage, she particularly likes something called the Ghibli Studio. And what she's done is she's fed a couple of photos of her into ChatGPT, and she said, please reproduce this in the style of Ghibli Studio. And so it's come out with these little cartoons, and it's actually converted the people into the characters, very similar in style to this particular studio, which is absolutely gorgeous and would be a great thing to use on social media. So you can now begin to use AI for producing images, and this might be another great way. I mean, I'm not an artist by any means, and I absolutely love the pretty Instagram pictures that you see, which are full of flowers, and I've never managed to do them on Canva, but I'm beginning to think, I might be able to do those on AI. So watch out, they might be coming out in the next few months if I manage to master how to do it. I think the really important thing to take out of this, though, is that, like everyone, when I started using it, I really had no idea how to use it. And now, as my coach Heather said to me, she said, see ChatGPT as a really helpful writer who's on your team. And that's what I use it for. So I will have conversations with it. My conversations with it are quite natural. I'll just chat away to it saying, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I want. Can you do me this? Can you do me that? And it's just absolutely brilliant in producing ideas. So it'd be really, really helpful for you if you're looking to increase what you're doing on social media. And just to add, because I'd forgotten to say this, that it's actually something that I use for alt text descriptions as well. So it's really helpful if you're using visual images to actually provide the alt text for it so that screen readers can help people who can't perhaps see it fully to know what's actually there. So when I do an image now, I'll quite often get ChatGPT. I'll pop the image into ChatGPT and I'll say, can you provide me with alt text? And it does it really well, much more than I could do. And it saves me time trying to work out what to say. So I always use it for my alt text now. So let's move on. I wanted to give you a couple of yes buts almost. So yes, use ChatGPT, but, and here's a couple of the buts coming up. As I said, it is like a giant guessing machine, and it's basically rubbish in, rubbish out. You do need to put in some good queries. And I particularly find this when people are using it to generate their profiles. Unless you really know what works, you're going to put stuff into ChatGPT and ChatGPT will spit it out for you. But unless you know the queries to use and the way to approach things, it actually won't really help you very much. So it's really important to be able to put good queries in. And with regard to your social media, I think it's really helpful to know who your target market is, because the way to make your posts impactful, whether or not you use artificial intelligence, is to know who it is that you're actually trying to reach. Because the more specific you can be, the better the posts that ChatGPT will help you with. So you could put something in like, you work with trauma, and it'll come up with probably a great list of trauma-related ideas. But if you were to say, no, I want to work with people who've been traumatized, you could, for example, be someone who does EMDR for people who've been in car accidents. If you're clearer and you talk about it and you tell the AI, this is what I'm doing, this is the people that I'm trying to reach, it will come out with a lot better ideas. So knowing who it is that you're trying to reach really will help ChatGPT or any artificial intelligence service to help you better. So know who it is you're trying to reach. It's really, really helpful. I can't emphasize this enough. And this is why I do talk about niching such a lot. If you know your target market, it really does make a difference to your content production. And obviously in Therapy Growth Group, that's something that I help my members with. It can take quite a while to define your niche. And so that's something that I help people perfect. Now, the other yes, but that I'd like to remind you of is that if you just use AI to generate all your posts and just copy and paste straight from the particular AI tool that you're using, it's going to be really obvious. And here's how I can spot an AI-produced post a mile off. First is the use of emojis. As someone I follow said, we're just going to be having these perfect posts with perfect emojis in. And it really is obvious with ChatGPT that it uses emojis. And so I tend to strip emojis out. And the particular style that it has of using emojis as well. That's just really obvious that it's an AI generated post. And I don't think any of us actually are all that interested in something produced by a robot. We want to connect with people. So this is a really important yes, but you can use AI as a really helpful writer for you, but you need to make sure that your posts are personal, that they're relatable, that they're written with your voice, and to make them that they're understandably you. So for example, I will use stories in my post, and those, I might get the AI to help me with the stories, but those stories are my stories. The ideas are my ideas. The way I write is the way I write, not the way ChatGPT writes. So it's really important for you to have your own personality in ChatGPT. And things like ChatGPT's use of emojis, if you see them, you might just stop reading the post. And then you might have done quite a lot of work on it to make it sound like you, or, you might have used one of your stories in it. So, just beware of the obvious signs. Another one is what we call the M dash. And I didn't even know it was called the M dash until I was on a forum recently and they were discussing it. And that is where you'll notice that people write and then they have a really long hyphen without any spaces around it that hyphenates the next clause of the sentence. That's another ChatGPT dead giveaway. So I always take out those M dashes, and in fact I've told ChatGPT not to use them. The other things are some of the words. I read a Guardian article a few months ago written by a university lecturer, and they said they can tell which essays are written by ChatGPT. And the word that they would look for is delves. So look out for the word delves, because that is a sure sign that ChatGPT's been involved in there somewhere. So that's out of my list of words that I use. And also another one that I've particularly noticed in therapy profiles is clarity. So it uses clarity an awful lot. And if I see another therapist profile with clarity in, I think I might scream. So just be aware of some of the words that come up frequently. And if you notice me using any of them, please let me know. I'd be very grateful. Anything, if you think, oh, that looks like Josephine's written that with ChatGPT, then do let me know. So the moral of the story is ChatGPT and all AI tools are really useful, but use them with caution. Now let's move on to talk about some of the dates that you might like to think about if you're posting on social media in June. In terms of awareness months, it's the Pride Month that comes up every June. It might be particularly important in 2025 in view of the political situation that's going on. And also it's Stillbirth and Neonatal Death Awareness Month, so SANS for short. So any of you who are working with neonatal deaths would probably want to be focusing on that in this month. I'm just going to give you now a very quick list of particular dates that you might like to look out for. So on the 1st, it's World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day. So obviously, if narcissism is something that you work with, or narcissistic abuse, that's a good day for you to be using. On the 7th, it's Tourette's Awareness Day. On the 15th, it's World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. So if you're working with older people, that might be one for you. The 23rd is Widow's Day. And the 27th is PTSD Awareness Day. There's another really important day coming up for families and for everyone really, is it's Father's Day, and that's on the 15th. Always a really good day to highlight, especially for people who might be missing their fathers or have difficult relationships with fathers. Obviously, Father's Day isn't a really good day for everybody. So that would be something that you could cover. Also thinking along the themes of fathers who perhaps struggle to be a dad. So, if people aren't feeling good enough, that's something that you could reach out to men with as well. And what I did is back in the episode for March, I talked about Mother's Day. And I think if you go back and listen to that, that's episode 52 of the Good Enough Counsellors podcast, that could give you some ideas, but just obviously transfer them to men instead of women. And just to add another day that I wanted to point out, and that's Autistic Pride Day, and that's on the 18th of June. But in addition to those dates that I've already given to you, I wanted to focus on a week that's coming up that I think would be a great week for you to use. And in fact, although it's only 1 week, you could expand it and talk about this subject for the whole month. And it's loneliness, because it's Loneliness Awareness Week starting on the 9th of June. This is run by the Marmalade Trust, who specifically are working to reduce loneliness in society. And if you visit the website, which I'll give you, the website is called lonelinessawarenessweek.org. You'll get a lot more information there, but also you'll see how Loneliness Awareness Week has been supported by lots of big organisations, and it's quite a big thing in their social media calendar. So this year does have a theme, and it's called Meeting Loneliness Together, and it's all about reducing the stigma of loneliness. If you've been listening to any of my social media podcasts recently, you'll know that I've introduced a framework to help you think about the sorts of posts you can post. And again, this would be great for putting into ChatGPT or any other AI tool. You could say, obviously, I've got 4 different categories, and they are educate, encourage, engage, and also the last one is empower, which you'd probably need to explain actually. ChatGPT actually gave me that E because when I was thinking of a framework, I wanted to have this particular type of post, but I couldn't think of an E to cover it. And this particular type of post is where you're actually encouraging people to come for therapy. You're empowering them to choose therapy. So the empower post is really what could be called a sales post. So you've got those 4 E's, and you could say to it, right, hello. I always use please and thank yous with the robots because you never know when they're going to become our overlords. So I'm very polite on ChatGPT, and I'll say, please, can you help me? I want to do a post. Let's choose Autistic Pride Day, and I would like it to be in one of these formats. I'd either like it to be an engaging post, which means that you want to start conversation, or I'd like to do an educational post. So you might do something around why Autistic Pride exists, or what it's all about, why it's important. Or you might say you want to do an encourage post. So that would be somewhere where you're trying to inspire people and encourage them. Or you want to use it to bring autistic people to your door. So tell the AI that you want to post in one of those particular formats, or even all 4, and it'll come up with them for you. And then you could choose the one that you like the best. Or you could say to it, those are all rubbish, please try again, which is what I do sometimes. So, if it comes up with things that I don't like, I'll just say, no, try again, please. Quite often it does actually always come up with a prompt where it says, would you like me to do X, Y, or Z for you now? Would you like me to turn it into an Instagram post for you? Or whatever it is. So you can usually follow along and use your conversation with it to refine what you're doing. But what I wanted to do was to talk about Loneliness Awareness Week. And what I did was, again, I've done this with ChatGPT, is I asked it to give me some different ideas for Loneliness Awareness Week for 4 different niches. So what I asked it to do was I asked it for the niche of anxiety, the niche of bereavement, the niche of relationships, and the niche of being neurodivergent. So here goes. I'll give you ChatGPT's ideas just to prove that actually it's really easy to use it. So I said, hi, I'm thinking about social media dates for June as part of this podcast. It's Loneliness Awareness Week with the theme of reducing the stigma. Could you give me some ideas for posts along the 4 E's framework? I'd like some ideas of posts for different niches. And then I gave it the niches. So here's what it came up with. So anxiety, it used the engage E of the framework. So start a conversation. And it suggested that you could talk to people about how anxiety is something that you might avoid people because you feel anxious, but then that increases your loneliness. So the question could be, how does anxiety affect the way you connect with people? You could do a little poll, for example. If you're thinking about your different attachment styles. Somebody who's anxiously attached may actually be somebody who really reaches out to a lot of people for reassurance, whereas someone who perhaps tends to close themselves away, if that's a different attachment style, they might shut themselves off. So that's sort of like a theme that you could maybe pull out if you were looking for more engagement. Thinking about bereavement, the AI put that against the educate idea. And there it talked about how people might be impacted by loneliness if they're feeling bereaved. So you could put some sort of ideas down about how people are affected, what it's like when people don't understand you, how you might feel lonely in your grief because people feel embarrassed about saying something in case they get it wrong. So lots of ideas there that you could use to talk in an educational way about how loneliness impacts you if you're bereaved. Now, for relationships, I asked it to do an empower post, and this would be talking about loneliness in relationships. So what it came up with is that loneliness in a relationship might be a sign that things aren't right, and that would be a great opportunity to come for therapy. And especially if, say, you're a couples therapist, you might want to encourage people that if they're beginning to feel lonely in their relationship, now is a really great time to come for couples therapy before things get worse and you get more and more disconnected from each other. So that's an example of an empower post using relationships. And finally, neurodivergence and thinking about encouraging someone who's neurodivergent. And the theme it came up with at this point was thinking about that you're not too much, you're not too sensitive, and you're not making it up. And then I thought, well, actually, with a lot of neurodivergent people, neurodivergent therapists quite often reach out by connecting with other neurodivergent people and showing them that are a suitable therapist for them by showing their understanding of neurodivergent conditions. And also neurodivergent therapists find it really useful to be able to be open about the experience of being neurodivergent. So I then put in a different prompt and asked it to turn it into something that uses a neurodivergent therapist's personal experience. So I'm going to read you out what it actually said. So as I say, I do ask it to give me a good opening sentence. So the opening sentence it gave me was, I used to think something was wrong with me because I didn't click with people the way others seemed to. And then the main message is that, I'm going to read it out to you. It took me a long time to realise I wasn't broken. I was just trying to fit into spaces that weren't made with me in mind. There were times when I felt deeply lonely, even when I wasn't alone. Times when masking left me exhausted. Times when I wondered if I'd ever find people who saw the real me and stuck around. I want to say this clearly, especially during Loneliness Awareness Week. Loneliness doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means you're human. And if you're neurodivergent and struggling to find connection, you're not the only one. You are not too much. You are not too different to be understood. You deserve spaces where you can be yourself without fear. I'm learning how to create that in my own life and in my therapy room too. I think that's a pretty good post, actually. I think that would speak to people. And then you've got a little call to action at the end, which is, if this resonates with you, then please get in touch to arrange a session with me. You're not alone. I mean, actually, ChatGPT said it better than that. If any of this resonates, I'd love to hear from you. You're not alone. You do have to watch that, actually. It started to say you're not alone quite a lot. That might be one of those yes but moments. So I hope you found this episode helpful. So what we've talked about is how to use AI, some of the different use cases. There's lots more different ways that you could use AI. Some of the, what I'm calling yes buts, use it but be careful. And then also we've just had a quick run through of some of those dates in June. And what I'd love to remind you of is that although ChatGPT can help you with your post, what I've got in Therapy Growth Group is a social media calendar. And I do a lot of the work for you. Every week I sit down and I prepare ideas for people to use every week, every day, in fact, for their social media. So lots and lots of ideas there to help you design your social media platform and reach out to people with posts that are really relevant to them. I do the work so that you don't have to, a bit like artificial intelligence. Thanks for listening. Do come and join my Facebook community, Good Enough Counsellors. And for more information about how I can help you develop your private practice, please visit my website, josephinehughes.com. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love it if you could share it with a fellow therapist or leave a review on your podcast app. And in closing, I'd love to remind you that every single step you make gets you closer to your dream. I really believe you can do it.